to the podcast. This is host Ash. Let me say something before we start this conversation. Running is beautiful. It gives us freedom. It gives us peace. It gives us that space where we can breathe and just be ourselves. But sometimes the very thing that shapes us can slowly start taking things away from us. In the endurance world, we often celebrate more mileage, more races, more suffering, more pushing, and somewhere along the way, passion can quietly turn into pressure. Today's conversation is not about today's conversation is today's conversation is not just about running faster or going further. It's about something it's about something deeper. It's about the relationship we build with our sports, our bodies, and with ourselves. My guest today has spent decades working with athletes, helping them understand nutrition, recovery, performance, and the psychological side of endurance sports. But more importantly, she understands the human side of it. In this episode, we talk about feeling properly, overtraining, REDS, social media pressure, and why so many athletes unknowingly push themselves into burnout. Because the truth is this: endurance is not just about how far you can go, it's about how long you can sustain it without losing yourself in the process. So, if you train hard, if you ever question whether you are doing too much or not enough, this conversation might actually change the way you look at running. In that note, please let me introduce to our guest today. Here is Renee. Hey, Renee. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to be here.
Yes. And when I look for profile, like when I look for who I want to talk on the podcast, and I was doing some research on the performance and nutrient side of it, and then your name came up on the top of it, like you've been doing this for so long and you have so many books about it. But before we get into your journey and talk about all these things that we all runners feel, can you please give a quick introduction? Who is Renee?
Of course, yeah. So I'm Renee. I'm a sports dietitian. I'm an author and I'm a runner. And I have been working in the field of nutrition for over 25 years now. And initially started my role within the clinical world, and then in 2010, I moved into the area of sports nutrition and really have just I guess I have actually bridged that gap between sports nutrition and clinical nutrition and now help a lot of athletes and individuals with their nutritional needs, whether that's for a performance goal or whether that's because they have developed a little bit more of a complicated relationship with food for some reason. So that's kind of what I'm known for. But I guess there's a lot more to my day to day than that, but that's what I'm known for.
You are also a runner, right? Because that is why I also wanted to talk to you. So before we start into what you do, when did you thought that okay, I want to run, or were you a runner from early age and something?
No, I started running. I think I was probably I was 28. So I just had my second daughter, maybe I was 29. My second daughter was 11 months old. And I just wanted a little bit of space for myself. And she had a tendency to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, have a feed, and then she went back to sleep. And I was then like, well, I'm awake now. And I had this little window between both the girls waking up again for the day. And so I decided to go for a run one day. I just thought, oh, you know what, I'll just go. We actually lived on a boat, and so we had the canal towpath on our doorstep. And I was like, well, I'll just run to the first bridge, and then I'll come back. And I did that, and literally my first run was like 10 minutes, to the bridge and back again. But I felt really good. I was like, oh, this feels really nice. Like I just feel really connected with the outside world, and it gave me an opportunity to have a little bit of space from being a mum, albeit just 10 minutes, but it made a difference. And I guess that's where it started. So I started running when the girls were really little, and I didn't do a lot. I just kind of ran maybe 3 times a week, up to maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. Like, it wasn't big, it wasn't a lot, because obviously when your children are little, there's only so many little windows you can have to go running. But it was really good for me, and I noticed that my mental health really improved. Like, I definitely was having a tough time after having had my second daughter, and I think running really kind of gave me an opportunity, like I said, to kind of just be with my own thoughts, be within my own time. I loved being outside. So that's where it started, really. It was like, so quite a long time ago now, like nearly 21 years ago. So yeah, quite a long time ago.
Yeah, and I think it helps, right? So whenever like I talk to so many folks, and everybody, most of them said I started running during the COVID thing, where everybody, like all of our mental health was in a very peculiar way, where the close thing kind of hit us out differently. And talking about you, running 10 minutes here and there, like 40 minutes, 50 minutes, one thing, but then you started doing ultra running. Then you started doing longer distances. And when did that change for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, it took a long time. I didn't go from running 40 minutes to running ultra distances, because I don't actually agree with that. I think it's really important to have a sound training, like a training age, to have enough years so that your tendons and your ligaments and your muscles and your bones are all like strong. So to begin with, my first goal was probably 2 years after I started running, and I did, no, actually it was, yeah, 2 years, and I did a 10K race. And then from there, I did a half marathon, and I did lots of half marathons for a long time. Like, that was what I did. Eventually, I think 3 or 4 years after doing half marathons, I moved into the marathon distance, and I ran 3 marathons in total. I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't really love it, but it was like one of those things. I kept thinking, oh, I'll try and go a bit faster. I'll try and go a bit faster. But every year I got the same time, and so in the end, I was just like, do you know what? This is probably as good as it gets. This is it. So I then started doing a bit more trail running, because I lived in Bath, and we had lots of trails on our doorstep. And by this point, like, and I guess I'd been running maybe 7 or 8 years by this point, and I had quite a lot of friends in the community, and they were all runners, but a lot of them ran on the trails, and so I moved into the trails, and then started doing like shorter trail races. So it was probably a good 10 years before I started running the longer distance. And even now, like, yes, I've done 3 50-mile races in my entire running time, but that's the furthest I've run in one go. And everybody says, oh, when are you going to run 100 miles? And I actually have absolutely no desire to run 100 miles ever. Like, I really don't. Like, like at the moment, so I ran Lakeland 50 in the summer, and I did work really hard for that, because I'd run it last year, and I wanted to see if I could do better. And the Lakeland 50 is, it's quite it's a tough race, because it's a very runnable race, but it's a very runnable race on technical terrain in the Lake District. So it's quite fast, and I just wanted to see what I could do. And I think, I did really well, and I was really happy. And in a way, I kind of made peace with the race. I was like, okay, cool. That's it. I'm done. I don't need to do that anymore. And since then, I've just been doing a lot of shorter races, like I did an 8K fell race. I did a 10K trail race at the weekend. So I'm enjoying that. Like, I quite like just changing it up all the time. Like, it makes it more fun, and it makes it more enjoyable. So yeah, I don't have this desire to go further and further and further, or do more and more and more. Like, I'm very comfortable kind of going, well, I just love running, so I don't really mind. I don't think I have to do something to prove my ability. I just really like running, and I like running in the mountains. So yeah, that's kind of my preference. If I had to choose a distance over the terrain, it would always be, oh, I want to run in the mountains. So I would do that.
Yeah, that is a very nice thing you said, that you like you build slowly. And if you had looking at the social media, like talk about different people, then they are the progression is so fast, because they do 5K, 10K, and then marathon, like half marathon, and then marathon, and then 50K, and then 100K, and then 100 mile, and things like that. So, and do you think that is one of the reasons people always get injury too? Because
Yeah.
when you, like you said, if your bones are not stronger, if your ligaments are not stronger, then you are putting so much pressure in your leg and ligaments. And then I think that is probably why I was injured too for most of the time, because I didn't pay attention to myself, but I was keep running and running and running to the point where it actually started hurting so bad. Then I would stop, and the stupid thing that we all do at some point. So
I think it's really difficult because when I started running, we're talking about, it was what, 2005 when I started running, and there wasn't really, we didn't have Instagram. Yes, there was Facebook, but it was more just to stay in touch with your friends. It wasn't like, you weren't posting all your achievements on there. It wasn't your brand. Like Instagram's become everybody's brand, right? So, and I guess for me, like I said, running started as an opportunity to create some space. But I think also I was surrounded by people that were also mums, that were also running, they were also juggling, and nobody did anything ridiculous. Nobody did anything like insane. Like everybody was just quite comfortable doing the local races, and that was, and it was nice. It was like a nice sort of sense of community, because you would go to these races, you would see your friends, you would race, and then you would go and have tea and cake afterwards, and it was really lovely. And I guess for me, I think now it's very hard because there's social media, and then there's running influencers, and I think the problem is that people look to these people who are getting paid to create content around their running, and they see them doing race after race after race after race, and like you said, building up, like they'll start with, they'll never have run before, and then suddenly they're like, okay, I'm going to go and do my first 100K within the first 9 months of running. And while some people will get away with that, and I'm not saying that you can't do it, it does depend on your background. Like if you were a kid that played a lot of football when you were younger and into your teens, then your bones are probably actually quite strong, because of the multi-directional movement actually is really supportive of strong bones and strong ligaments and strong tendons. But if you were a very kind of academic teenager, child, and you didn't really do much sport, and then suddenly you're like, okay, I'm going to start running, and you just start increasing, and you don't rest enough, then your body doesn't have time to get strong. And that's the thing. It's like every run you do is an opportunity for your body to learn a bit more, to take on information, and then obviously you've got to fuel it at the same time, and you've got to rest it. Like I'm very good at resting. If I'm tired, I won't run. If I have done a big race, I will take a good month off before I even think about what I'm going to do next. And I don't think that is I don't see that a lot. I think most people do a race and they're already thinking about the next race, and I think too many people are doing too many long distance races in 1 year, and of course this depletes us, right? It depletes our nervous system, and it depletes our energy systems, and so if we don't recover properly, then every time we set foot, we're pushing ourselves more and more into the hole, and of course then our body at some point goes, okay, I can't do this anymore. And so I think, yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to a colleague of mine the other day, and she said to me, oh, you're really lucky you never get injured. I said, I'm not lucky, I'm just sensible. And that's the difference, right? Is that I do get injured. I have, like, in my time, I don't think anybody gets away with no injury. I have been injured, but I can hand on heart say to you, Ash, when I have been injured, it's been because I haven't listened to my own advice. I have not rested enough, or I've suddenly increased my distance really quickly from maybe having a period of time where I haven't run that much, then suddenly just decide I'm going to go and do 3 20-mile runs for no apparent reason, and then end up, injured. And so I think this is the bit that's really important, is that understanding your body and understanding what you can do. And it's not saying you can never go and do that 100-mile race or that 100K race. If you want to, absolutely, there is nothing going to stop you. But you do need to build up to it properly, and you need to put the right building blocks in place. So that means doing the strength work, doing the rehab work, doing the plyometrics, fueling, sleep, like all of these things are really important. You can't just go, right, I'm going to just train, and then go and run 100 miles and not expect to get injured. It's really important to put it into perspective.
Yes, definitely. I also signed up for my first 100 miler for next year. It's in August. I have 9 months, so I think I have time to do it slow and not rush it. And I really like what you said. And I think this is one of my major problem with Instagram is we see these people, like you said, the paid people who are paid to do these things, like to create the content and stuff. And everybody wants to be influencer, and that is what I don't get it. I stopped posting at all. My runs at all because I am not running for other people. I'm running for me. So I stopped doing that. I used to post every day too, but at one point I thought like, why am I doing this? I'm not. I'm just putting my things out there, but why? Like I am not running for anybody else. I'm just running for me. I want to be healthy. I want to just enjoy it. And I think the pressure that it creates when I have so many friends that do 100 miler, 60 miler, 50 miler, and then I think once you are in this kind of environment, then yeah, you want to get motivated, you want to get inspired, but also then it is so much pressure that everybody is running so much of a distance these days. It's like, oh, I want to do that too, and that's why I think a lot of people are running such a longer distance in such a less amount of time because they want to like imitate other people. Like you said, they're looking at these people and they're like, hey, I want to do that too, and I think that I just like, I don't get it. Like, why do you have to be influencer? Like, are you running for yourself or are you running for somebody else just to post your stat? Like, I don't get it. Like, and yeah, I stopped using it. Like, if I didn't have put to this podcast thing, then I don't think I would be totally off it and not post anything because it just, I think it, for me, it was just too much of, yeah, I compare a lot with other people and it was not good for me. So I just like, okay, I just don't want to do it. And I really like what he said that when we are looking at other, building slowly, looking at yourself, taking care of yourself, and knowing why you run, I think that is why. And I think with all this influencer thing, we have forgotten our why, and that is that is sad, really.
I think don't be too hard on yourself. I think the comparison trap is there because of, we know we've got there's that saying, right? Comparison is the thief of joy, and we all know that. But the problem with social media is it makes it very easy to compare yourself. Whereas again, I go back to when I was starting out in running, there weren't really that many people to compare myself to. Like I was never going to compare myself to the elite level athletes because why would I? And obviously, even within my kind of peer group, everybody had been running a lot longer than I had. So I wasn't really interested in comparing myself to what others were doing. I was more interested in what my journey was and what I could do, and also what was possible with the time I had. Like I was a mum, I was working, and I was trying to run. Like it's quite a lot to juggle in one go. And so I think the comparison trap is probably what causes most people's demise, if I'm honest. I think, like every day I talk to individuals who've become injured or become impacted by the fact that they have pushed themselves too hard, whether that's running or cycling or, some other activity, because again, it's all caught up in kind of almost needing this kind of sense of validation. It's almost like you're trying to attain your worth through your achievements. And of course, I mean, a lot of us do that, but I think again, if you take stock and you stop and you kind of realize, oh, okay, this is why I'm doing this, and realize it's not a very healthy thing to do. And actually so for me, my relationship with running has definitely changed over the years. Like I'm not going to sit here and say to you that I've never been affected by all this noise. Of course I have. Like especially when I was doing marathons, I definitely got caught up in I need to be faster, I need to be faster, I need to be faster. And and as I said to you, I got the same time 3 times. So I kind of, but I was always also okay with going, okay, that's 3 times. So that's telling me something. And I guess I have that ability to take that step back and, kind of go, okay. But when I did move into longer distance, the first year I did longer distance, I definitely got carried away because, you do your first 50K, then you do a 50 miler, and it was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I feel so cool and I can do these things. And, and I guess at the same time, there was a lot going on for me personally in my personal life, and running was an opportunity, I guess, to escape from that. It was a way to switch everything off. And so I probably relied on running a bit too much, and I did get sick. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I didn't. Like, I got sick because I did too much and I was under a lot of stress. And the combination of the physical stress of running and the emotional stress of what was going on at home, and the fact that I was also working with Olympic and Paralympic athletes at the time, like, there was so much stress in my life that it did end up with me developing an autoimmune condition, which actually then stopped my running for about 18 months. So I had a period of time where I couldn't run. Like, I physically was so unwell, I could not run. So when I came back to running after 18 months, having been told I would never run again, I was so grateful for the fact that I was back running and I was out in nature again. And I used to just run with my dog, and we would just do 5K and we would run, walk. And I do that 3 times a week. And I used to say to myself, if this is all I can do, then that's fine. I'm like really happy. And I guess at that point, my relationship with running really changed because I'd lost it. I was like, I don't ever want to lose it again. So since then, I never take it for granted, but I also always run for my reasons. And my reasons, my main reasons are because I love being outside and I love the connection with outside. But also, I love how running makes me feel. It makes me feel strong and it makes me feel capable. And that's about my own personal kind of relationship with it. But also, I do run because I want to be a good role model. I want to open the door for people, for women of color, particularly for Asian women and Asian men, but generally, like, I want people to see that you can still do these things, like, because we know that from the stats that Asian women are still the lowest percentage of women that engage in sport in the UK. And so for me, I think, okay, why is that? And we need to change that. And you can't be what you don't see, right? So I want to make sure that I'm opening that door. And I guess as a mother to 2 daughters, that was even more important to me because I never wanted them to feel the barriers that I had felt growing up with sport and everything else. So I guess there's so many whys there for me that it does make my relationship with running so much easier because whenever I always say, I was talking to a friend yesterday and she was saying, oh, I should go for a run. I said, as soon as you say you should go for a run, you shouldn't, because you should want to go for a run, not I should go for a run.
That just reminds me the conversation I had with Alex Klein, and he's wicked fast, run so fast on a mile race, and then he said that you need to don't say want or would or need. So you said I want to do it because you really want to be able to do it. And like you're talking about, that also reminds me of the conversation with Lucy Bartholomew. She said the comparison is a thief of joy. You said that too, and it's so true. Like when you look at all these other people doing so many incredible things, and you don't know their history, how long they have been running, and all those kind of things that we have to take into consideration too. But we just get into this cloud of where we want, like you said, the validations. I think that is what I don't like about social media, is because we seems like we now do things for likes and kudos and for others, not just because we want to prove ourselves. We just like because that person is doing it, so I want to be able to do it too. So yeah, I think that is one of the reasons I am just taking a step back and just doing my thing. I don't care. I don't need to show people what am I doing, how am I doing. So I'm just run around like how I want and do my races if there is. I don't do a lot of races. I think there is only two races planned for whole next year, so I think that is gonna be the focus and just try to enjoy because I've suffered a lot. I used to be really really big kid, so the this doubt like when you are a big person growing up, then you're like, oh, I cannot run, and running marathon was a dream, and I did my first ultra. That was like I cried at 55 kilometers. I was like, oh my god, this I cannot believe it. That was like so funny. I look at the video myself and I'm so funny, and yeah, and I you just made me realize that is so true, and I just immediately thought of my brothers, my cousins, and everything, especially my cousins who are like female, and I just like they don't run, they don't get into activities, they don't do anything, they're just happy being a mom. And I know like a lot of my sisters are like that too, and I don't get it, and I try to motivate them to go out, have fun, and be just have fun, just enjoy your life, like don't be just this person, you can do so much more. And now going back to you, right? So you were mentioning earlier on you work with athletes with the dietitian and the diet. So can you please explain in a nicer term what is that? Because a lot of people don't know what is it.
So there's, I think most people will know what a nutritionist is, but I am a dietitian. And the reason I'm quite proud of that title is because the term dietitian is regulated. So you can only be a dietitian if you, at a minimal level, have got a degree in dietetics. And dietetics is the study of food and the body, but generally within clinical context. So within the context of illness and other clinical conditions. So that was what I did as my first degree, well, second degree actually, was dietetics. I actually did biochemistry first, and then I did dietetics. And I worked, like I said, in the NHS for 10 years. And during that time, I worked with people who had cancer, I worked with people that had kidney disease, I worked with people that had gastro problems, with surgical issues, with children, and then within the children capacity, like within conditions like cystic fibrosis, like eating disorders, liver conditions. So it's really varied, and you get a really good base in knowledge. And I moved into sports nutrition primarily because I have always been very sporty as a kid. I was always in all the teams at school and always loved dancing, and I've always been active. And I had, like I said, I'd started running at this point, and lots of my peers were asking me questions on nutrition for running and how do you know? And I was like, well, like I have got a dietetics degree. I have a degree in nutrition, and I understand how it works, but I don't have a degree in nutrition when it comes to sport. So then I decided to go and do a degree in nutrition when it sports nutrition. So that was my third degree. So I left the NHS at that point, and then I went and did another degree. And I guess it was, and like I said, and it wasn't too difficult for me because I have got a nutrition base, so I didn't have to learn everything from scratch. Like I knew a lot of it, but it was more about the context of understanding nutrition when it comes to activity. And that's different, obviously, to nutrition from a clinical condition. But having the two together was a really unique skill set. And I guess what then sort of happened was the more I worked, so when I qualified, I then ended up getting a job working with the Great Britain rhythmic gymnastic team that went to London 2012. And from there, then, because the work was well received and I did well, then I was asked to then go and work with different sports. And so that was like my career. For the first sort of, I guess, 7 years of my role in sports nutrition, I just worked with different teams depending on who needed me. And I went to Rio in 2016 with the Paralympics. So I went with wheelchair fencing and wheelchair basketball, and I was like I was not only their team dietitian, but I was also their kind of team sort of lead in terms of kind of sports science lead. And when I came back from Rio, I was quite exhausted, and I just felt that maybe performance nutrition wasn't really completely aligned with my core value set because I really care about people. And I was struggling sometimes with the directive we were getting from the top about performance and medals and not seeing the athlete for the person. And I really cared about the person. So it was a really tough decision. But at that point, I decided to step away from the very high performance world of nutrition. And I set up my own consultancy. And what I didn't expect was to be so busy. I didn't expect that then all the national governing bodies and a lot of the athletes that couldn't get help within their teams would come to me. And so it was really busy. And then I guess we're kind of from then on in, that's really been what I've been doing is I work with athletes. So in my clinic, we see a range of people. So we see everybody. We're not kind of, it's not just athletes, but we do work with a lot of professional athletes. We work with a lot of national governing bodies and a lot of sports medics that send particularly athletes that have a complicated relationship with their bodies and with food. So I work directly with them. But then we also work with recreational individuals, age groupers, grassroots, anybody that is interested in keeping fit and healthy, but might have a goal. So maybe it's their first ultra and they want advice on how to fuel properly, or maybe they're going to a multi-day event and they want advice on how to manage that well. Or again, like I said, maybe somebody who has fallen into the trap of social media, followed advice, got themselves into a bit of a mess, and is now struggling with what to do next. And so that's fundamentally, I guess, what I try and do is help people reach their potential. And that can be a very short journey or a very long journey, depending on where we start. And so that's kind of what I do in a nutshell, I guess, in the most succinct way I can manage to say it.
And if you look at today's world, right? So when we look at social media, when we talk to a lot of people who are doing these longer distances or even shorter distances, so there is this myth or there is this word that more mileage is more great, more mileage you do, you better you get, more endurance in these kind of things. So what are your beliefs or what you believe? Like, is that true? Like, when I talk to different people, there is a lot of things because some do less, they are okay, they are performing. Some do more, they are performing with that too. So where is that thin red line in that?
It's a really good question. I think I definitely come from the camp of training quality over quantity. But I think everybody's different and everybody will have a threshold. So, for example, 10 years ago when I was running, I definitely had a limit to my volume, my weekly volume. And if I went over that weekly volume, I would always get a niggle or I'd just get too tired or, I just couldn't do it. But again, 10 years down the line, when I've been running again for another 10 years, now my volume, I can go a bit higher without feeling tired or without having any issues with injury or kind of breakdown. So I think firstly, it goes back to that training age. So understanding what your body can cope with, and everybody's going to have a limit to the load at which they can cope with. But also we also have to consider your life load. So if you are, for example, if you are a doctor or particularly maybe a junior doctor who's on different rotations and working quite long shifts, and then you're also trying to run big long distances, that might be just too much load and you might end up breaking down. Whereas if you are maybe an office worker where you are generally more sedentary based, your body and your job's actually it's not that taxing, it's not that difficult, then potentially you're not going to have that external stress. But if you are one of those people that's maybe going through a divorce and you're trying to run, that stress, that load might be too much. So I think it's like, so we've got the basic threshold and then you've got to think about all the other aspects of your life that are in there. If you've just had a baby, your parents to a newborn and you're not sleeping very well, you probably have to consider what you can do, because if you don't sleep, you don't recover. And if you don't recover, then actually it's a bit futile to keep going out and pushing yourself, because you will end up injured or at a point of breakdown. So I think it for me it's not like I have a one size fits all. It's very much based on what else is going on in your life. Where I think you have to be really mindful is going back to what we were saying earlier. There are a lot of people that do a lot of mileage because they believe they need to do that mileage to get the outcome that they are aiming for. But I don't always think that is true. I think a lot of them will do the mileage because it's a belief system rather than an actual factual system. And that's where it can become a bit more obsessive. When you get people who are like, I have to run 150K a week, otherwise that won't be okay. It'll increase their anxiety. Like they'll get like twitchy if they haven't hit that number. To me, then that's a problem. That's where it starts to become problematic. So like, we all have a volume that we might like to achieve in a week. And I definitely have a place I like to get to, but if I don't, then I don't. It's like, okay, well, it didn't happen this week. Like, last week, because work was so busy, I didn't hit where I would normally hit. But it's okay. I was cool with that. And I know this week is also really busy. It's not going to happen. It's fine. Nothing bad is going to happen. But I'm very comfortable with that. But I know a lot of people that would really not be. And so then what will happen is their behaviors become problematic because they start waking up at 4 a.m. to fit that 2-hour run in, or they go late at night, or they're missing out on good recovery time or good nutrition time in order to fit the run in, but not again realizing that those building blocks are so much more important. And actually sometimes doing a little bit less mileage probably does you good because it gives your body a chance to adapt and recover, rather than I think people have this ridiculous notion that if you don't train even for a week, somehow your fitness is going to drop, or somehow you're going to put weight on in a week. And it's not going to happen, because that's not how the human body works. It's what you do in a few weeks makes very little difference. If you're doing that over several months, yeah, maybe you'll see a little net change in your body composition and your fitness level, perhaps. But even that, it might be minimal. Again, it's this belief system, but again, that's informed by all the missed messages that we read and see and hear daily.
Yes, yes, that is so true. And how do you navigate through that? Because we talked about this cloud, I call it, because people post, oh, I did 100 miles in a week, I did 150 miles, but then when that person, for instance, me, if I try to replicate, then I'm going to get injured. Maybe I can do it 1 week, right? So the next week, my body can't handle it because I'm not built to do that kind of mileages. So I know there are so many folks who are in the same boat, like when they look all these things and that looks fancy, that looks awesome, but then they know their body cannot handle it. So how do we navigate through all of this, and what are the key signs that we need to look that, okay, we are doing too much?
Yeah, so I always say that you have to, when there's a message out there that you're trying to absorb, you need to ask yourself, how relevant is this to me? So, for example, if I read something that says that, the winner of Lakeland 50 ran 160-mile weeks, great. That I can't do that. I know that's not going to be me. So for me, I'm quite comfortable making peace with that and just thinking, well, I'm not running to win. I'm running for all those other reasons I've mentioned. So it kind of takes that competitive aspect out of it from my point of view. So I think anything you read, you have to kind of ask yourself, is this relevant to me? And also you've got to look at your own lifestyle. So for example, as I said to you, for me, I tend to look at work and see what a day looks like. And a really good friend of mine helped me with this, and she kind of helped me to start color coding my weeks and my days. So if I have a very heavy day of like working with clients, which is very draining on my energy, then that's a red day for me. So even though I might be sat down, actually I find it emotionally very depleting, and so it's a red day. So if it's a red day, I won't do a hard training session on a red day. Whereas if I have a day where I'm maybe doing research, or I'm doing some writing, or I'm doing more like podcast recordings, which are not maybe as kind of depleting for me, then those are like maybe an amber day or a green day, and they're the days that I'm more likely to start adding a bit more speed or maybe a bit more volume, because I'm like, okay, my body can handle that, so for me, I'm very, very conscious of that overall load, because I know from experience that if I tip that load, that's when I tend to get injured, or I get ill, or I don't see any improvement in my training. And so that's one of your key signs, right? Is if you're doing all this effort, but you're not seeing any benefits, you're not getting faster, you're not feeling stronger, you're not able to maintain the week on week on week without feeling tired, that's a pretty big indicator that you're overdoing it, and it probably isn't, that you're not at the right place for you. So that's one indicator. Another indicator would be that you're not recovering very well between training sessions. So, normally, as long as you give yourself like 24 hours, 36 hours between training sessions, if you're fueling well and you're resting well, actually you should feel quite bright and comfortable going again. But if you're not, if you're finding that you're getting a little bit, you're still noticing soreness particularly after like 36, 48 hours, you've still got muscle soreness, that could be an indicator that either you're not recovering very well, or it could be an indicator that maybe your vitamin D is a bit low. So, you need to go and check these things out. But it's all kind of in the same realm, because actually our vitamin D tends to drop significantly as well when we're not resting enough, because vitamin D is really integral in our muscular recovery. So if we're doing a lot of exercise, we're using a lot of vitamin D, and then if we're not replacing it, or we're not kind of recovering properly, we're not giving ourselves enough rest, then that will decline. So they're both indicators that, again, things are a bit off. You might find that your motivation starts to wane, like where in the past you'd be like, oh yeah, I want to go for this run, you're like, I really don't want to go for this run, or I feel like I have to go for this run. Again, going back to that language that we use with ourselves, rather than it being something you're looking forward to or enjoying. And so that might be something. You might find your sleep starts to deteriorate, so you're just not sleeping as well. And again, it's not always an indicator of overtraining, but I think it's one we can't ignore, basically. You might start getting more recurrent injuries and niggles. I'm not talking about like big injuries, but just constant little niggles that are not going away. So again, you're not giving your body enough time to rest and recover. And then some little bit more like extreme symptoms you might notice will be things like maybe your digestive system becomes impacted. So you start to struggle with issues with your gut, particularly when you're out running. So you've had no issues before, and suddenly every run you go on, you start to get kind of gastro distress, and that is a sign that maybe the gut permeability has become very thin, and so you can't cope as well. And obviously in women, then also there may be changes to the menstrual cycle. So in women, you might find that your menstrual cycle either gets lighter or it gets shorter, as in the days of the cycle. So between each cycle becomes shorter, or can become a lot longer, or in the worst case, it stops completely. And in guys, what they often find is, this would be a very extreme case now, but in men, that if your morning erectile function is less than 5 a week, that could be a big indicator that you're overtraining quite a lot. So the symptoms will range, and they may even fluctuate to start with. They may come and go a little bit, and so that's what can make people sometimes think, oh no, I'm okay, I feel fine today now. But I think the fact is, if you're noticing continuous symptoms for 3 weeks or more, I would say that's a pretty good indicator that something's off. Now, that might be that you're not fueling enough for the training you're asking yourself to do, or it could be that you're not resting enough. Most likely it's a combination of the two. And that sort of presentation we've just discussed although we're calling it overtraining, is actually now termed REDS, which is that relative energy deficiency in sport. And although it's talking about energy deficiency in sport, and that kind of makes you think it's about food, it is usually a combination of the two aspects of not recovering enough and also not fueling quite enough for the work you're asking your body to do.
So funny because as you were telling the story, and I was like, oh yeah, I have that too. I feel that too. I feel that too. I feel that too. And I was like, okay, wow, that is like story of my life. That is just what you just explained is how I felt in my last training cycle. Was that is what I felt like. Right now, I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I think I haven't run a lot this week and last week, but that is what I have felt like when I was doing a lot of training, then some niggles here and then, and that was coming back again and again, and it was not going back, especially around my quads. And like I said, I used to be this big person, so for me the food is so crucial because in my mind I always think that I need to lose weight, I need to be skinny, and that is so hard because and that's why I don't fuel myself enough after the run, after do anything. Then I am just like, I need to lose weight. I cannot take more of the calories and stuff like that. So, but that is so interesting because what you just described is what I've been feeling in my whole life, as in terms of when I was running a lot and I just felt all of that. And
I
now,
think it's important to say that the whole kind of energy in, energy out is a really poor equation for humans because we're not textbooks and we're not machines. And actually, when you're running a lot or you're exercising a lot, you have a very high energy demand. And it's not just the energy that you're consuming, you're utilizing when you're actually doing the exercise. It's actually the energy you also need afterwards to adapt from that exercise and then also to recover. And that's what most people forget, right? And so and it's interesting you're saying, you don't recover properly, you don't always fuel yourself properly because you're worried about your weight and you're trying to lose weight. Actually, by not fueling well, by not giving your body what you need, you actually prevent your body from losing weight.
wow,
Right? So, because the body goes into what we call energy saving mode and it starts to pull back, which is why you get all those symptoms. All those symptoms are basically related to not having enough energy in the body and the body starting to shut down to preserve energy so that when you do go running, it can give you the energy to go running, but it can't do both. And so it starts to shut everything else down. So this is why the symptoms are not all at once. They kind of, it's like when your phone is on low battery mode and it slowly starts to shut everything down. The lights kind of go off with each app. It's a similar sort of thing that's going on in your body. It's like the lights are going off in your body and there'll come a point where it then just goes, okay, I can't, that's it, I'm done. And often that is when maybe somebody presents with a big stress fracture or they present with complete total burnout and exhaustion or an autoimmune condition or something more serious, or maybe a presentation of all of those things. And that's what REDS is when all those cumulative effect of not fueling well and not recovering well becomes too much for the body to cope with, and then you present with these symptoms that make it impossible for you to continue with what you want to do. And one of the misconceptions people have is that, oh, but if I was not eating enough, surely I would lose weight. But actually, when you're running or you're active, that's not how it works, because the human body will always prioritize energy for movement, because that's how we have evolved from our ancestors, to be able to kind of override those periods of famine in order to go and run and get food, right? So we'll always be able to go and do the activity, but at the cost of something else in your body. And that's the problem. So it's not like something that would suddenly just kind of switches and it's a very slow process. And often people can be in this kind of state of low energy availability, under recovery, for maybe 18 months to 2 years before any symptoms show. And often by the time the symptoms show, particularly like talking about the low testosterone in men particularly, that will be really way down the line. And when that happens, that is then when, that is when actually things will be really, really quite bad.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought of that. In my mind, I always thought that the best way to lose calorie or the best way to lose weight is to the calorie deficient, right? So that is what we have been told, that in order to lose weight, you have to eat less as compared to the amount of calories you burn, and that is the way to lose weight. So I think I need to pay more attention to what I do in the future. And we talked about this red, about the energy deficiency. So, what are the things that we can do to get out of it or make it better? So we are more mindful of how our body is reacting. And like I've been talking about, there are so many other people like me who are more focused on losing this weight and trying to get slimmer or something like that. So, how will it work for us?
So I think the thing to remember, get progress in your training. If you're, you know, then actually you have to fuel training appropriately. You have to give your body what it needs. You give your body what it needs, it can then do the work you're asking it to do. And that's also how you then end up with the right body composition. So, too many people focus on the body composition first and then think the performance is going to come. But actually, if you focus on the performance, if you focus on, okay, I want to do these 4 sessions in this week, which means I need to eat, I need to make sure I'm eating enough carbohydrate to support my training. I need to make sure I'm recovering really well with good quality carbohydrates and protein to replenish my glycogen stores. I need to make sure I'm hydrating well, I'm resting well, I'm sleeping well. If you do that, if you fuel for your training, then you will end up with the body composition that your body wants you to be based on that. And you'll also train so much better. So, actually, the likelihood is you will actually end up leaner. Whereas when you try and achieve a body weight or a body composition first, when you fixate on a weight over performance, what you do is your behaviors mean you don't eat enough to fuel your training. And if you don't fuel your training, then of course your body can't it can't meet its potential. It can't meet its full potential in what it wants. And so then you're obviously also at the same time you're not giving your body what it needs to meet its potential, so it goes into energy preservation mode and you actually hold on to more body fat. So actually the old kind of beliefs around energy in versus energy out, they are now becoming, we're seeing more and more metabolic studies that are showing that actually it's not about calories per se, but it's more about nutrient quality and and lifestyle that makes a big difference to our body weight and our body composition. But also, I think it's really important to accept that we're all different. So we all look different, which means we're all, we can't all be, we're not, everybody can be a really low body weight and not body, a really low body fat percentage and function really well. Some people will need to be a higher body fat percentage, and that's where their optimal is. And it's looking at your genetics and being comfortable with that. So I think like it's really important to focus on what your performance goal is rather than what your body looks like, because it's really the least interesting and the least important thing in all of this.
So interesting. And as we were talking earlier on, you mentioned, I think this is a critical factor. And as you were talking about it, I just realized it that there is so many things that are happening in our life that add to that stress, right? You talked about like a divorce, or your job might be bad, or there you're like other things that are putting some stress on you. And for me, it was like I had these fixed dates for my training. So like let's say Monday, it was like 15, 16 kilometer of tempo run where I would run around so fast and try to get everything done. So do you think that is a disadvantage? And like you were talking about earlier on about your calendar, where you have these markers on your days, like red means no hard training that day. So green or lighter color means that those are the days to push yourself a little bit harder. So do you think that is a bad way to like schedule your day? Instead of that, we should just keep our calendar open and then just see how your days go and then just plan our run based on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very lucky that I have a very good relationship with my coach. And I do have a coach now. I've had a coach for 5 years. I didn't have a coach for a long time, but actually, for me, actually, the problem was kind of where you're at, in that I just was doing too much. So, and I think that's why I ended up in the place I ended up, because basically I just wasn't looking after myself. And so I decided to work with a coach, which helped me to stay accountable. So it was really useful having a coach who could help me understand that I didn't need to do all these hard sessions, and actually I needed to run slowly sometimes, and sometimes I needed to run faster. And that was really, really useful for me. And now over the years, like, we've got to know each other, and he knows that my work is very, very complicated, and sometimes I'm traveling, and sometimes I have a whole day of like just talking to people. And so we tend to connect every Sunday, and I'll tell him, he'll say to me, what does your week look like? I'll tell him what my week looks like, and then he schedules my training around that. So if he knows I've got a hard day on a Wednesday, that might normally be my session day, but actually he'll change it and he'll make it work for a different day. Also, similarly, we've learned over the years that when I go and travel for work, obviously I didn't train at all when I traveled for work, but I used to come back the next day and think I should travel. But what we found was I was actually really tired from the traveling. So now we have an optional run day depending on if I feel like it or not, and there's no pressure on me. So I think for me, I've learned a lot about what I can cope and tolerate with, and he's learned that alongside. So he's very good at, kind of adjusting my training. But if you haven't got a coach, then I think, again, it's useful to kind of have specific sessions that you might feel like you need to do in a given week. But I think you do have to move it around depending on your day. I don't think you should become a slave to the actual, okay, on Monday I must do this and on Friday I must do this, because I think that's actually quite obsessive and problematic. And that's why so many people end up getting stuck and also end up in a place where they are under recovered and, not resting enough. And so yeah, I would say it's important to be more fluid with your training plan.
And as we were talking about earlier on, we talked about the feeling and also the recovery. You said that you don't even think about any of the races up until like a month or so, and then you take 24 to 36 hours of recovery in between the runs. So let's say somebody is running and then they're doing this hard trail running session. So how should their fueling and recovery should look like for the next 2 days? Let's say they did a 40 miler or 40 kilometer of high vert training session.
It's that's quite a big training session. That's quite I would be recommending, if I'm honest. But let's go with it because you've suggested it. So I guess if you know you've got a big 40K training session coming up, then you'd need to be thinking about that. Let's say you're doing that on the Sunday. You need to really be thinking about that on the Wednesday. So from Wednesday evening onwards, you need to be making sure you're getting plenty of carbohydrate, kind of Wednesday night, Thursday all day, Friday all day, and then maybe Saturday you kind of just eat normally as such, so that you can feel comfortable. But you definitely need to be thinking, okay, I'm going to get enough carbohydrate, so you've got full glycogen stores before you start that training session. It's also important to remember that even with full glycogen stores, you've probably only got enough energy in there to last 2 hours. And so a 40K hard training session is going to be a lot longer than 2 hours. So you'll need to make sure you're then fueling those sessions as well. So making sure you're taking on carbohydrate during the session. And I would start taking that on within the first 30 minutes of the training session, so that you're never letting your body deplete too quickly and too much. And then once you finish that 40K training session, really important that, again, you ensure that you have a good recovery choice. So you want carbs and protein. Now, after doing something that hard, you might not feel like eating straight away. So actually that's where having recovery drinks, so things like the chocolate milk and bananas and things like that, can be really, really helpful just to start that recovery process. And then within a couple of hours, you've finished. You kind of follow that up with a proper meal of carbohydrate and protein. That might be it might be rice and might be you know like eggs and toast or something like that, but it'll be a good balanced meal. And then really you need to be recovering every 2 to 3 hours again with carbs and protein to make sure that if you are going to run again within 24 to 48 hours, you've actually given your body a chance to replenish the glycogen stores that you run again. But my advice would be probably to definitely take a full rest day afterwards, probably take two, and then on the following day you do an easy recovery jog, not anything too intense. So that, I mean, I'm no coach, but that would be my advice.
I said 40K because I've seen people do 30K on Saturday and then 40K on Sunday, and they post it on Instagram. So that's why I asked, gave the 40K example.
Yeah,
Was like that is what the people do on the long run
yeah.
for this
And
harder run. So
I have, and I know, and definitely I have done back to back long days where I have done, you know, in the lead up to say something like Lakeland 50, I have definitely done like a 6 hour day on Saturday and then maybe a 3 or 4 hour day on Sunday, but they haven't had any effort in them. They're like, I'm running at a lower intensity rather than putting any real effort into them. And on those, when you've got those back to back days, then absolutely, again, still the recovery in between is so, so critical, but also the nutrition you're taking on board during is really key. And if I have had a back to back day like that, then I usually end up having 2 full rest days the following week before I start thinking about running again. So if you're going to do those, you have to have a lot of rest built in to make sure you don't get injured and get too depleted.
definitely, I think yeah, I need to keep in mind. I think there are a lot of things. I think this has been so eye opening for me, and in a way, because what you just described are the things that I have been thinking, and I always feel this burnt after certain events. So I was training for Berlin Marathon before, and while I was in it, then I just felt that energy and then low energy and tiredness, fatigue, and less. It's just like why I am doing this, all this kind of thing that we feel when we train for a marathon. Few things like before you go, like before we sign off from this. So the other thing would be very interesting to know is when when we are going on a training block, right? So as like some people might do it 16 weeks, some people might do it longer depending on what are the
Yeah.
mileages they are going. So what would be your recommendation? As we just talked about earlier on, like less food is necessarily not a good way to do or run ultra marathon because that would just burn you out in a longer longer run or longer picture. So how would you frame everything? So if somebody is training for a 100K, like how would you suggest that they form their fueling planning as well as their routine and stuff like that?
I mean, I tend to suggest that people look at their training plan and then again make choices based around tailoring to their training plan. So I've gone into quite a lot of detail about this in my book Fuel for Thought, where I've taken specific examples like 100K and then what you would need to do to ensure that you're fueling well around the different types of runs that you might do in your training plan. But I think the key thing is that when you're training for something that big and when you're running most days, even if it's like more like 4 or 5 days and you still got a couple of rests, the mistake a lot of people make is to not fuel as well on their rest days. And actually, those days are your adaptation days. So actually, you do need to fuel really well, and there's no need to kind of pull back on nutrition because actually, most people will find that they're more hungry on their adaptation days, on their rest days, because that's a chance for the body to kind of go, oh, okay, this is an opportunity for me to get the energy in I need to recover from what I've just done and then basically start preparing for the next the next episode of running. So I think like what I find is, I mean, I'm a big fan of like listening to my own hunger and honoring my hunger. So what I find is that when I'm training hard, when I'm in a big heavy training block, I am always hungry. Like I will eat my 3 meals like normal, but I'll also probably need anywhere between 2 to 4 snacks a day as well. And I don't have an issue honoring that at all, because equally at the same time, because I trust my body, I know that when I'm then not in big training, I still eat my 3 meals, but I probably only want maybe 1 or 2 snacks a day. Like my body adjusts, and I definitely listen and adapt to my appetite. But where I will be very specific will be around recovery. So, for example, if I've done a really hard training session, whether that's like a tempo run or like intervals or even a longer run with a bit of a tempo in the middle, if I've done something, I know that generally speaking, my appetite's a bit low when I finish. It's like I don't often have much of an appetite, but I also know that I need to mechanically eat at that point. So that's when I will make sure that if I can't eat, then I'll also drink. I'll always have like, say, like chocolate milk and a banana, and then I'll follow that up. So I'll be a bit more mechanical when I know that I need to eat, but maybe I don't feel like it. Similarly, if I'm fueling for a longer run and I'm just struggling with the volume of food I need, then I won't hesitate to use drinks to help me get intake in. So I'll often have a hot chocolate with my lunch, or I might have a glass of juice with my breakfast or something like that, just to add a bit of extra carbohydrate, but without it feeling too filling. Whereas, because sometimes it can be much harder to eat the volume of pasta, for example, but it's much easier for me to drink the drink. So there are a few kind of things that I tend to do, but I think that the general thing is looking at your training and then tailoring your nutrition according to the training week. And there's a lot of really good information in my book, Fuel for Thought, which covers all of that and your requirements, but also there's lots of practical suggestions as well. So lots of like ideas of food and food choices and meals and recipes and things like that. So hopefully that will help. And I cover, like I said, lots of different types of events, from 10K all the way up to 100-miler to even multi-day events and even events in the altitude. So there's lots of different bits of information in there.
I gotta get my hands on that. I'm gonna check it out. So two things left. This is the question I ask everybody. Why do you run?
Why do I run? I think I've probably answered that at the beginning. I run because it makes me feel like me. When I was little, when I was a young girl, I really struggled with friendships, and I really struggled with feeling accepted, and had quite a tough time. And I remember the first time I felt okay in myself was actually my parents took me on a pilgrimage to Hemkund in India, and it's a temple, in a Sikh temple in the Indian Himalayas. And I just remember feeling so at peace being in those mountains. It wasn't the pilgrimage, it wasn't going to the temple, it was just being in the mountains. Like I felt like the mountains were talking to me and telling me I was okay and I was good enough. And I think that's it for me. Running, especially running where I live in the Lake District, it always makes me feel at peace and like I can breathe, and I don't have to, I can just be me.
So I think that is for a lot of us, is that is how we what you describe is how we feel about running. And there is this rapid fire. I'm just gonna ask you a bunch of questions, random questions, whatever things comes to your head first.
Okay.
Coffee or tea before a trail run?
Coffee.
Favorite must-have item in your backpack for a mountain run?
Waterproof.
One word. What does endurance mean to you?
Resilience.
Sunrise or sunset run?
Sunrise.
Trail or road?
Trail.
And this is the final question I ask everybody. I would like you to please finish this sentence for me. Running has changed my life because.
It's provided me with the people that make me me.
Awesome. This was so good because you just described whatever I've been feeling in my life and my running journey so far. And I think you just opened my eyes in a way, like what I need to do in order to improve. And like I said, the being fat and this image of that I need to eat less to lose weight. I think that has been a shock to me because you just told me to do the opposite of what I've been doing. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people like me who's gonna be like, what? What did we just hear that? So yeah, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry about my camera. Like I said, my computer is actually nearly it's dying, and I need to get a new one, but to avoid the cost at the moment. So, thanks for bearing with me.
No worries, yeah, no, this has been good. So no, I can just publish audio one, so that is not a problem.
Great.
So yeah, this has been such a nice conversation, and thank you so much for your time. And I'm definitely gonna get a book, and I think when I publish the episode, we can tag your book as well, so people
That'd
can
be
get that one
great.
too.
That would be really great. Thank you so much. I really
Yep.
appreciate it. It's really nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, same, and have a lovely evening.
You too. Take care.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thank you for making it to the end of the podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this conversation. I'll see you again next time with another guest. Until then, happy running.